The Middle States Commission on Higher Education is a voluntary, non-governmental membership association that defines, maintains, and promotes educational excellence across institutions with diverse missions, student populations, and resources. The Middle States Commission accredits more than 500 colleges in Delaware, the District of Columbia, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. In 1919, the Middle States Commission developed out of its parent organization, the Middle States Association of Colleges and Schools, to focus on post-secondary institutions. In 2010, the Middle States Commission on Higher Education filed a complaint with the U.S. Department of Education against its parent organization. The association was preventing the Commission from acting as a separate and independent agency, which is a requirement for accreditors in the 1992 reauthorization of the Higher Education Act of 1965. To become its own entity, the Middle States Commission on Higher Education had to demonstrate to the Department of Education that their dues were being paid separately from those for any other related group, the agency develops and determines its own budget with no review or consultation with any other entity or organization, and that the agency pays a fair market value for its share of any joint benefit or service, which in this case was the office headquarters that the agency shared. After taking administrative steps to address these changes, the Middle States Commission of Higher Education was separately and formally incorporated under Pennsylvania Commonwealth law on March 1, 2013. Accreditation from the Middle States Commission and other accreditors is important because both federal and state governments consider accreditation to be a reliable authority on academic quality. The federal government relies on accreditation to assure the integrity of institutions and programs that receive federal funds and for which the government provides federal aid to students through Title IV of the Higher Education Act of 1965. Eligibility for state funds for higher education institutions are also contingent on accreditation status. The Middle States Commission on Higher Education assures students and the public of the educational quality of a higher education institution. There are three key strategic goals of the Middle States Commission. The first goal is to provide relevant and reliable assurance of educational quality through an effective and efficient accreditation model that promotes innovation. The second goal is to develop a healthy, forward-looking, and adaptive organization. And the third strategic goal is to broaden public understanding of the value of accreditation through advocacy and education. These goals are an integral part of the accreditation process of the Middle States Commission and afford them the credibility to ensure that an institution of higher education is operating with integrity. The Middle States Commission currently accredits 523 institutions, and there are 4 institutions that are currently candidates for accreditation. 98% of the institutions accredited by the Middle States Commission are both degree-granting and nonprofit. Regional organizations may also accredit non-degree for-profit institutions, but this is a rare occurrence. To be accredited by Middle States, institutions must first meet a series of 15 requirements. If they meet these requirements, they are then eligible to be reviewed per the 7 revised standards. The 15 requirements include topics such as authorization and licensure to award post-secondary degrees, ensuring institutions comply with applicable laws and regulations, an institution's mission statement and goals are approved by their governing board and define its purpose within higher education, and the governing structure is disclosed and is responsible for the integrity of the institution, to name a few. For first-time accreditation, institutions must graduate 1 class before a Middle States visit, or prove that they have positive student outcomes. As long as these terms are met, an institution is then able to be reviewed per the 7 revised standards. The standards for the Middle States Commission on Higher Education were revised in 2014, and in conjunction with the previous 15 requirements, institutions are required to demonstrate compliance with these standards and requirements and to engage in ongoing processes of self-review and improvement. The revised standards were guided by 4 principles. First, the mission-centric standards acknowledge the diversity of institutions. Second, the focus of the standards is on the student learning experience. Third, the standards emphasize institutional assessment and assessment of student learning. And fourth, the standards support innovation as an essential part of continuous improvement. At a glance, the 7 revised standards include mission and goals, ethics and integrity, design and delivery of the student learning experience, support of the student experience, educational effectiveness assessment, planning, resources, and institutional improvement, Governance, Leadership, and Administration. The Middle States Commission has an 8-year review cycle, which is intended to assist institutions in setting appropriate goals and measuring their success at regular intervals. The review cycle begins with an in-depth institutional self-study that is reviewed by peer evaluators during an on-site evaluation visit. These processes are used to verify compliance with the Commission's standards and requirements of affiliation, as well as with accreditation-relevant federal regulations. The review concludes in an accreditation decision. Outside of this regular schedule of review, the Commission reserves the right to review a member institution's accredited or candidate status at any time. There are a few ways in which an institution can lose its accreditation. They can voluntarily lapse on their accreditation by failing to schedule visits, failure to submit required reports and documentation, or failure to pay their dues to the association. An institution can also fail to meet the Commission's accreditation standards and requirements of affiliation. If this is the case, the Commission will file a noncompliance action against the institution. To have the noncompliance action removed by the Commission, the institution must take appropriate steps to prove that it is in compliance with all accreditation standards and requirements within the timeframe established by federal regulation. The institution remains accredited or maintains its candidacy during a noncompliance action. A visit is required in a noncompliance action. Noncompliance action precedes an adverse action. In an adverse action, the Commission can revoke or deny a candidate's accreditation status, and therefore its membership in the Middle States Commission on Higher Education. Taking all of this into consideration, we would like to assess a case study of Mount St. Mary's University, located in Emmitsburg, Maryland. In the 2015-2016 academic year, the president of Mount St. Mary's was accused of questionable actions surrounding the institution's retention rates. In emails between the president and the provost that were leaked to the student newspaper, the Mountain Echo, President Simon Newman was quoted as writing, "My short-term goal is to have 20 to 25 people leave by the 25th of September. This one thing will boost our retention 4 to 5%. A larger committee or group needs to work on the details, but I think you get the objective." Further, he acknowledged using an unfortunate metaphor in a conversation with Gregory Murray, an assistant professor of history. The metaphor in question was, "This is hard for you because you think of the students as cuddly bunnies, but you can't. You just have to drown the bunnies, put a Glock to their heads." The tension escalated when he fired 2 faculty members, one of which was tenured, and demoted the provost. After these events unfolded, the Middle States Commission gave Mount St. Mary's until March 15th to answer questions regarding their compliance with the Commission's accreditation standards. They specifically mentioned 4 key standards that were in violation: leadership and governance, integrity, student admissions and retention, and the faculty. Ultimately, President Newman resigned on February 29, 2016. Mount St. Mary's was able to retain their accreditation status. A second case that we would like to briefly review is that of the Pennsylvania State University, herein referred to as Penn State after the Jerry Sandusky scandal unfolded. The release of the Free Report, a 297-page report of the FBI investigation of the alleged cover-up by former President Graham Spainer, led to a warning from the Middle States Commission on August 8, 2012 to the university. Although the university was warned, their accreditation remained intact. A statement released by Blaney Bowen, Vice Provost for Academic Affairs, stated, "This action has nothing to do with the quality of the education of our students. Middle States is focusing on governance, integrity, and financial issues related to information in the Free Report." The Middle States notification to the university cited that Penn State was an infringement of the requirements of Affiliation 5, compliance with government policies, regulations, and requirements, and 9, an institution's governing body is responsible for the quality of the institution, for ensuring the mission being carried out, and for making necessary institutional operations information freely available to the Commission, as well as standards 4, leadership and governance, 6, integrity, and 3, institutional resources. The Middle States Commission warning required that Penn State prove that they made reparations of the charges by September 30th, 2012. The university was reevaluated after Penn State submitted all of the proper reports, and based on those, Middle States lifted its warning to Penn State on November 15th, 2012. The Middle States Commission on Higher Education sets a common standard and quality in the education of the 8 states and territories it oversees. By utilizing the requirements and standards, quality of characteristics ranging from the institution's governance to the curriculum are consistently confirmed. The Middle States Commission works to keep their accredited universities in service to their student population and will continue to work at their tradition of quality education.